Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, we're going to do something a little different, and I'm going to dive into something every orthodontist and office manager might think about, but rarely discuss out loud. Are we building careers for our teams or just providing jobs? After spending years helping doctors build and improve their practices, I've seen firsthand what team members really want from their positions, and it might surprise you how often it has nothing to do with the paycheck. In this episode, I'm going to break down the tips that can help practices set a real path forward for teams and team members so that they're not just checking in, but building something that lasts, a career in orthodontics. So let's jump in. And now, a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Want a cleaner workflow for orthodontic cases? Meet Clarity Solutions from Solventum, formerly 3M Healthcare. The Clarity portal puts aligners, digital bonding, and retainers in a single streamlined platform. One workflow, fewer handoffs, and more control for planning through retention. Simplify your next case. Reach out to your local Solventum sales rep today or visit us at go.solventum.com/clarity. Again, that is go.solventum.com/clarity to learn more. Hey docs, if your new patient follow-up depends on someone remembering, it's leaking revenue. Greyfinch automates new patient follow-up, texts and emails go out automatically, and your treatment coordinator just checks their tasks list to see what needs a quick call or a more personalized message. That is one of the many reasons I recommend everyone take a look at Greyfinch. It isn't just a follow-up tool, it's a complete practice management software built to help you grow and scale. Stop leaking revenue and get $500 off your startup fee with the Jill Allen special at greyfinch.com/Jill Allen. I'm super excited to be speaking, and this topic that I'm talking on is something that I think every doctor, office manager, this is a topic that's really on our minds. And how are we building careers and not just jobs in our orthodontic practices? We're going to be working through 7 ideas that I have that's going to help you as doctors and office managers really determine how you can set the path forward for building a career in your practices for your team members. And we can get away from just providing jobs in which we've got team members that are kind of hopping from job to job. So when we think about this, I really like to have docs think about, and office managers think about, what do you think your team really wants out of a position at your practice? And I think a lot of times as orthodontists or office managers or team leads, we assume that our teams view their roles as a career, like we did as an owner of a business or as a doctor in your practice. A lot of times, you think about, you went to school to become an orthodontist, or you got into this because this was your career. But a lot of times when we are surrounding ourselves with our teams, they don't necessarily know, especially team members that are entering in early into their job life, that there can be actual careers in the orthodontic field outside of being an orthodontist. So it's interesting, over the last 20 years running my own business and being in the orthodontic field for over 30 now, when we sit down with team members across the country, I hear lots of different things from team members about what they want out of the position that they're holding. Many employees feel like they're doing a job, but not necessarily building a future. And I really feel like when somebody feels like they're just doing a job, they're going to behave a little bit differently. They're going to disengage a bit sooner, and they're going to maybe look elsewhere faster because they're just not kept captive with what they're doing. And a lot of times, what ends up happening is they invest a lot less in our practices emotionally. So, what we want is we want to find team members that are looking to get into a career path. And so that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of bring along. So I want you to just kind of think about this for a minute. I asked this question at the AAO when I spoke this year. I asked everybody in the room, hey, quick show of hands, how many of you have had an employee leave in the last 3 years? It was pretty amazing to look out in this packed room of doctors and office managers and team members, and almost every person in that room had their hand go up. And I think if you were to just reflect for a minute, anybody who's listening, and you were to ask this question of yourself, have I had an employee leave in the last 3 years? I'm going to bet more than likely you have. And the sad part is when we were at the AAO and everyone's kind of looking around, it's not you. And I want you to hear that, doctors or office managers. It's not just you, and it's not just your practices that are having problems retaining team members. It's everybody in our industry. And I like to take it just a step further and say, it's really everybody, even within our dental profession. So many times when we're out gifting or doing different things, what you realize and what you see on so many threads is everybody is really struggling to keep employees long term. It's kind of interesting when I look back over my years in the orthodontic field and think about when I was first getting started in orthodontics, definitely employees were staying to the end. They were starting with the doctor and ending their career with the doctor. And that is just not the case anymore. What I see in orthodontic practices now is we're lucky if we get 3 years out of most of our employees that we hire. So let's talk about what is causing some of this, what I think is this big shift that's happening in our industry. And what I believe is happening is that the expectations of employees has shifted. And what has motivated teams, especially if you've been in the industry for a while, a doctor that's maybe more seasoned than some of the startup docs that I work with, is that what motivated teams 10 or 15 years ago is no longer enough. And we now have to think about the fact that we have up to 4 different working generations of potential employees in our practices right now. Where when I got into orthodontics, we had 1 or 2 generations. So the expectations of the employees coupled with the generations that are within our practices is really making a shift in what our team members are looking for. And when we think about this, and we look at the reality of what our workforce teams are looking for, I think that this list here is pretty important to think about. And I think that I want you to really note that the last thing on this list, financial stability, is really what the team is looking for. So, of course, everybody wants financial security. I mean, that's a given. When you look at what it costs to live and what it costs to raise families and whatnot, everybody's looking for that financial security. But what I want you to hear from me is that money is not enough to create long-term commitment anymore. I think that that is this big shift. There are other pieces that are really playing into what team members are looking for when they're looking at a path forward or a career in orthodontics. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for growth. They're looking for recognition. And they may even be looking for some flexibility. So I really love this little saying here. People don't leave jobs. They leave environments where they cannot grow. And I truly believe in our orthodontic practices that we have to keep a mindset of growth is the currency of retention. If we want to retain our employees, we have got to give them a growth path into our practice and show them where their career can go in orthodontics. Because I really believe that when somebody feels stagnant, when they just don't feel like they're fitting in or they're going somewhere, what they start doing is they start imagining life somewhere else. And I think this is what we're seeing in our orthodontic practices, where we have these team members that are just moving from one job, hopping from one job to another, is they're looking to find that purpose. They're looking to find a place that they can grow where they aren't going to just be, make the coffee, make the donuts every day type of a mentality. So what I want you to think about is, I believe that your goal as practice leaders should be to build an environment where your team and your people that you're choosing to surround yourself with see a future in your practice. So when we think about what this means and why it matters, so many times I think that we think about this and we think, well, this isn't just a human resource issue. But what I want you to think about is it's a practice performance issue. And when we think of it in that way, we think about the fact that if we don't have the right people in place that see a vision, that see where we're going, that see a future in our practice, what it does is it ultimately affects the practice and the performance of the practice. And I think each one of you could probably think about, a successful orthodontic office. And maybe you can think about, somebody you follow online or somebody that you've had an opportunity to go visit their office or whatnot. And what I think is really interesting is when I work with practices and when I see really successful orthodontic practices that are just really clicking, they all have a few things in common. And most of the time, what you see is that their teams stay. And when their teams stay, they become incredibly powerful. They're able to build trust with patients. They're able to communicate better, and they perform more efficiently. And so the goal is to help you understand, how do we make this path forward for teams and team members to be able to see that there is a path to a career when they say, hey, I want to accept this job that I've just seen or found out on Indeed about. So let's talk about the second idea, and that's why money alone doesn't work. And I think this is the old adage for decades. This has been the model. Salary or wage plus an annual raise equals employee retention. And I'm going to bet that many of you who raised your hand or have thought about, have I lost an employee in the past 3 years, probably did this, but didn't end up getting employee retention. And again, that's because this model has stopped working. It isn't just enough to have a salary wage and maybe to give an annual raise. That's not enough anymore to keep our team members happy and to have them feel like when they're showing up every day that it's more than a job. And I feel like, many times what I see is practices fall into this trap of that old adage of every year we give a little nominal raise if we're even going to give a raise. But what I want you to ask yourself is, does that fundamentally change how somebody feels about their work? Does a 3% raise or a little this or that actually change how somebody feels about their work? And I'm going to say probably not, because what I see when we have that model where it's it's time for the review and they're going to give me a 3% raise or they're going to give me the 25-cent or whatever it is raise, what it becomes is raises become expected rather than motivating. And what we need is something that's going to help motivate our teams to see that we are creating a career path in our orthodontic practices. And the way I see it is motivation usually lives in two categories. We've got hard motivators, which those are financial, which I'm not going to discount the fact that we need to pay our employees well, but we also have soft motivators. And these are that emotional component that I feel like most practices focus really heavily on the first one, that financial motivator, and they ignore the soft motivators or that emotional side of it that is really kind of what locks our team members in and helps them say, you know what, I do want to stick with this, and I do see myself building a career in this practice. So let's talk a little bit first about the hard motivators, pay and bonuses. And as I'm going through this, I think that some of the most obvious ones that we can talk about are pay scales. Now, I'm going to a little bit later and talk about really what I believe pay scales should look like. But pay in general, what are you going to pay somebody, and how does that correlate into potentially bonuses, benefits, financial incentives? And I believe that all of these are important. These are the core foundational pieces that everybody needs to have an understanding about when they're hiring on into a position. But they have to be structured correctly. So when we think about pay scales or pay, one of the biggest mistakes I see is that practices are really inconsistent with pay structures. A lot of times raises happen really randomly. Pay is different between team members who may be doing the same job. So a lot of times, if you don't believe that your team members, it isn't going to get out what everybody is being paid, you're probably really mistaken. I run into this a lot when I'm working with doctors, and they're like, well, I hired this person at this skill level or at this pay, but I'm bringing this other person on. It's the same job, but I'm going to pay them differently. And so it can cause a lot of unrest a lot of times. And I think a lot of times for team members, when compensation feels unclear or inconsistent, what it eventually does is it creates resentment. And that is not what we want in our orthodontic practices when we are looking at how do we build a career for our team members within our practices. The next thing is bonuses. I get asked a lot about bonuses, especially because I work with a lot of startup practices. And I think that bonuses can be very powerful, but only if they are clearly tied to performance. And I think that a lot of times in smaller practices or younger practices, I'll say especially, sometimes the practice just isn't big enough to implement bonus structures. But I will tell you, if you are doing bonuses, or if you are going to use that as one of those motivational factors, if your team members do not understand how the bonus works, or they do not understand how they're going to get that carrot that you're kind of dangling in front of them, it's not going to motivate them. So when we think about bonuses, you really have to think about, are you going to be transparent with the way that you're going to present it? Is it actually achievable? So many times I have doctors that are just like, oh, I heard on a Facebook group that we should be trying to grow our practice 25%. So that's my growth goal. But they haven't actually looked at their own data. They don't know what other person set that goal and where they're at in their practice life cycle in comparison to where they are. So when we set those type of goals and we haven't put a lot of thought into it, and we're just randomly trying to motivate the bottom line, which a lot of times is just increased production, it ends up getting us a real negative effect. So we really have to think about that and what does that look like. So for me, I think just giving you some examples, there are so many different ways to give bonuses in an orthodontic office nowadays if you're going to do that. But the important thing is having alignment, and your bonus structure should reinforce the behaviors that make your practice stronger. So there's a lot of really common bonus structures out there, and you just have to kind of think about which ones make sense. And from consultant to a doctor, I always say if you're going to run a bonus system, you should always have a start and a stop time. We're going to run this for the next quarter. We're going to run this for the next year. We're going to run it for however. Because if a bonus system never has a start and never has an end, just like raises that come every year, it will become ineffective. and it will not motivate your team the way you would like them motivated. So, as we kind of finish up on the bonuses component of it, I really want you to take this to heart that bonuses that feel random or unreachable can be probably one of the biggest pitfalls that you can do in your practice because your team will stop caring about them. And again, it's that consistency of this is what our goal is, these are the outlines of it. Things like that are really going to help motivate your team if that is a lever you're going to pull. So now let's talk about the emotional side of what I call soft motivators. And I know some of you may, squirm a little bit when you think about, emotional, but there really is an emotional side to what our team members are looking for when they are thinking about what makes me feel like I want to stay and keep this job in your practice versus go somewhere else and envision myself in somebody else's practice or even a totally different career opportunity. So when we think about these soft motivators, I really believe that they're really underestimated, but I do think that they're very, very powerful, especially with our younger generations entering the workforce. And some of the things that we can see that people are looking for is recognition, is development, is a purpose for why they're there. They're not just there to answer the phone. They're not just there to enter into a contract. They're looking for some of these different things, and sometimes even autonomy, to be able to be given an opportunity to work and provide a good work product, but without having to be micromanaged the whole way through it. Recognition is really simple. And I think that it's incredibly impactful when you as a doctor or you as an office manager can take the time to just give a genuine thank you, acknowledging effort, celebrating progress. These are really small moments that can really create loyalty with a team member. Again, most people want to be seen, they want to be appreciated, they want to be valued. And I would challenge you, for anybody who's listening, I know as a business owner, it's tough running a business and you've got 101 things going on. And when you've got a team under you, it can be hard to take the time to genuinely make eye contact and say thank you, or genuinely recognize when somebody does a good job. We can kind of give the cursory, hey, good job today, everybody, as you're running out the door. But is that genuine? And are you creating that environment where somebody wants to be loyal to you and your cause or your dream or your practice? When you invest in your team's development, I really believe something really interesting happens. And that's that they will invest back into your practice. And we have such incredible opportunities in our orthodontic industry to be able to give our team members, to show them that we want to invest in their development. There's so many different CE courses that don't cost you anything, but allow a team member to see that, oh my gosh, they want to send me to that, retainer course, or they want me to log on and they're going to pay for my lunch so I can learn a little bit more about digital workflow. Anytime you guys have an opportunity to invest in your teams, I promise you, they're going to see that investment as value and you're going to get something out of that. So just look for those opportunities when you think about growth opportunities. Another thing that I think is really important to think about when we are building our team and we're thinking about what does it look like to come together day after day, spend 8 to 9 hours a day. I mean, the crazy part is, and we all know this, we spend more time with the people we work with many times than our own families. And if we can also lean into team experiences, retreats, team building, celebrations, any of those different things, it will really help build culture in your practice. So I want you to think about this. Culture is not built through policies, but it's built through moments. And I think for a lot of doctors, that's what we're constantly looking at and working for is to build culture within our businesses, culture that makes somebody want to stay more than 3 years. And I promise you, docs and office managers, it is not built by the policies that you have in your handbook, but it's built through the moments that you're creating outside of that handbook. So the next section that I think is really important that I want us to talk about is building career paths. And we've kind of been building up to this. And when we think about our orthodontic practices, I want you to really think about this question. And when you're thinking about, as a leader, one of the most powerful things you can do is ask your team members, where do they want to grow? Not how are things going, but where do you see yourself developing in this practice? Does the team member have an opportunity to even visualize what a career looks like in your practice? And I know for a lot of you, you may be thinking, well, I've got a smaller practice, or I've only got so many people in the clinic, or so many TCs, or so many front desks. And that's okay. But for every role, every one of our core roles in our orthodontic practices, there is a path to a career. There is something bigger than that entry-level position. And I think most of you would be pretty surprised at how many people would pause if you asked them that question, because I don't believe that we take enough time to see where our employees want to go. We, unfortunately, most of the time, employees assume that they were hired to do tasks and not build a future. And what I want us to think about is, how do we build a future for our team members within our orthodontic practices so that they aren't constantly looking over that fence at that grass is greener. Oh, it would be so much better to go be a vet tech. Oh, it would be so much better to go learn how to cut hair. Oh, it would be so much better, because that's the path where they see to a career instead of a path within our orthodontic practices. And I really think that once we start having these career conversations, that relationship between you as the leader and them as a team member starts to shift. And that's when they can start seeing themselves as somebody who's building into a career as a professional. They're not going to be the doctor, but they're not going to hold your role. But gosh, what does that look like? I mean, I think about when I got into orthodontics, so many years ago, I had this really great doctor that kind of laid it out for me and said, hey, Jill, you're starting as a sterilization assistant, but if you learn this role and you like it, you've got an opportunity to become a clinical assistant. And if you become a really good clinical assistant, you've got an opportunity to start to teach others. And then from there, if you want to try your hand at treatment coordinating, let me show you the steps for that. And I think if we can do that for our team members, yes, it's investing a little bit more, but what's harder, investing every 6 months, every year in training a new team member, or looking for ways to show our team members that there are career paths within our orthodontic profession? So when somebody sees a future in your practice, I truly believe that they're going to behave differently. They're going to invest more energy into your practices. They're going to take ownership of what they're doing. And the biggest thing is they're going to stay longer. Now, can I say that, we're going to have team members that stay for the next 20 or 30 years like generations of the past? No, probably not. But if we can get somebody that stays 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, what an accomplish that would be versus 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years. And for all of us, we know what matters most is long-term team members. Experienced teams communicate better with patients. And in turn, they're going to anticipate problems faster within our practices. So if we can really lean into what is it going to take to have higher team retention, what does it take to build this career path, That is going to be, in my opinion, what makes the difference between team members looking at our practices and saying, hey, this is a job, or hey, this is a career path where I can actually see myself moving along over the next years.
And now, a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Are you thinking about opening an orthodontic practice? I know, it's a big decision, but saving 25% on the ADEC equipment you need to get started, that's an easy one. Because ADEC has a special program called Smart Start, designed to help you launch your first practice. You get up to 25% off your ADEC orthodontic equipment and furniture. You also get complimentary services to help you run and grow your business. And my favorite part, access to the Smart Start pricing for 2 whole years after you open your doors. That gives you flexibility to add more chairs as your cash flow grows. It's pretty smart. As an orthodontist, you care about getting all the little details right, and ADEC really got it right with this program. So if starting off with a big savings on ADEC equipment sounds good to you, the ADEC Smart Start is definitely worth a closer look. Just follow the link in the show notes to learn more.
So as you all know, we've got core roles within our orthodontic practice. And I truly believe that there is a career ladder that can be established for every core role in our orthodontic practice. And I'm going to use the assistant role because I think that's the easiest one to make my point with. But I want you to think about you can do this in every core role. So probably in most practices that I work with, especially if it's a more established practice, every assistant is just an assistant. You know, you're an assistant, you're an assistant, you're an assistant. And a lot of times what I see is that employee that is an assistant, and again, I'm just using this role, could be front desk, could be communications coordinator, could be TC, could be FC. There's a lot of times when there is no delineation to what a career path looks like, what that employee sees is I'm an assistant. I don't have there's no progression in what I'm doing. There's no differentiation in what I do. There's no growth in what I do. There's no structure. There's no career path. So therefore, if there's no career path, why am I sticking out? Why am I staying here? Okay. But what I want you to think about is, could you develop a visual career ladder for your team members that shows them where they can go? So instead of a team member feeling stuck, they start thinking, what do I need to do to move up this ladder? What do I need to do to develop more skills if I want to further my career path in this orthodontic practice? And so here's just an example again. And of course, this would be for a busier, bigger practice. But if we kind of show that path, maybe starting as sterilization and then a clinical assistant, level 1 clinical assistant, a level 2 clinical assistant, maybe lead assistant, up into digital coordinator, up into clinical coordinator. If somebody sees that it's just not assistant, you're just an assistant. You just treat the patients. You're just an assistant, but they can actually see and they're in control of their growth and they're in control of where they go. What we are going to see is team members that are actually choosing orthodontics as a career and not just a pathway on into something else. And so what I want you to be thinking about is, if we can show what a career ladder looks like, it's going to show that team member growth. And it's not just a title change. So if we can, at each level, a level 1 clinical assistant might be focused on basic assisting procedures and learning workflow, whereas senior assistant may be a team member that mentors new hires and manages clinical efficiency maybe. Or maybe a lead assistant may oversee inventory or training or clinical protocol. I mean, every office is different and how you would set this up. pays differently. But if you have changes at every level and it's the team member's responsibility to move their way if they want towards a career, what it does is it then sets us up for how we might move somebody through pay levels. And I know a lot of you probably just got a whole lot of heartburn because I put some numbers on the screen. And I'm going to say this for anybody that's a team member that's listening or anybody that's a doctor. This is just a very generic visual to give you an understanding of how pay and pay levels can work depending upon as somebody is moving their way through that career ladder. So if a team member comes in and they start as a clinical assistant, a level 1 clinical assistant, and you say, hey, as a level 1 clinical assistant, you're going to make between $18 and $21 an hour, depending upon your skill level. And it's up to them to work their way through that skill level. And hey, if you want to become a level 2 clinical assistant, these are the duties, these are the skills that are going to be required. And you're going to probably make anywhere between $23 and $25 an hour. And what's great about this is it takes away, like what we were talking about at the very beginning, where raises are based on every year after year, we give a raise. What this now does is this empowers the team member to say, hey, if I want to make more money, if I want more responsibility, if I want to do more, the carrot is there and the path is there. But you know what? If I don't want to, and I'm really happy being a level 1 assistant, and I'm really happy with the pay that I'm at, it's okay for them to stay there too. And I think this is what really makes that difference in just, yep, we're just going to give people a raise and hope that they stay versus an employee, instead of feeling stuck, starting to think, hey, what do I need to do to move up on this career path? And I think it shifts from time worked into skills developed. And that's ultimately what we're wanting, right? Is for team members to feel like they're working towards something. And if they work towards something, they get rewarded for that. And I think that this is also something I just want to bring up is not everybody, we don't need everybody to be a lead assistant, or we don't need everybody to be the office manager of the practice. We need team members in every, I usually say like for in the assisting role, level 1, level 2, level 3 assistants, but we need people in each of those roles. And we shouldn't just expect that because somebody has been with us for X amount of time, they should make more money if their skill level has not increased. And I think that is something we have to just be really, really careful about. So when I work with practices across the country, what I often tend to see is leadership potential just hiding kind of in plain sight. And I want each of you as office managers and doctors to really think about this. When you start to see leaders developing in your practice, those are usually the ones that are bought in and are seeing this career path. A lot of times what you're seeing is that's that team member that goes the extra mile and helps train others, or who notices the inefficiencies in your practice and starts to bring them up with solutions, not just complaining, but says, hey, I've noticed this and I've got this solution. What do you think? Somebody who steps up when things are getting really busy or crazy. Those are the people that you really want to be investing in, because those are definitely the ones who are showing that skill set of, hey, I can do more than just be a level 2 assistant, or I can do more than just be a level 1 assistant, instead of just everybody gets lumped in as assistant, assistant, assistant. So when we think about this, I do want to say this is, again, I think because especially anybody who's an office manager or a doctor that's listening, so many times we think, well, I wanted to do this, so therefore somebody else should want to do it. But not everybody wants to have a job where they manage people. And some team members want to be leaders, but others just want to master their craft. And I want you to think about this. It's okay to have both because both should be valued in our practice. Not everybody needs to be a leader. Not everybody has to be a manager. Not everybody has to be that top tier employee. It's really great to have an employee that just has mastered their craft and is just really, really good at what they do. And I see this so many times in every area of our practice. And that can really make a difference in, again, just how well our practices do when we've got not just team members that want to be leaders, but team members who have mastered their craft, whether it's how they answer the phone, how they are able to move a patient from on the fence to a start in that TC room, or maybe get that overdue $50 out of that patient that hasn't paid in a year. So always, keep in mind that it isn't always about moving towards leadership. It's also about giving credit where credit's due for team members who may not want that role, but also want to just be really good at what they are. So how do we create a career and develop that plan? I think that it's so important if you're really taking this to heart, that you're really thinking about, okay, what do I need to be doing? What does the team member need to know as far as what skills they're developing if I were going to set out a career path for them? What does that next level look like? What does their pay look like? And how do they get there? What does that timing look like? Then again, not everybody wants to move up the ladder right away. And I think that that is completely okay. Sometimes I think as business owners, we're drivers and we put our head down and we went to school and we did the work and we got through. And that isn't always the path that our team members are going to take. And that got to be okay with that. But we've got to be able to give them a path to career development. And that's really what I'm hoping you're sitting with as you're listening to this presentation. So we talked earlier about pay structures and career paths, and absolutely all of these things matter. But I want you to think about culture. And I really believe that this is what determines whether people actually stay long enough to grow. Anybody can offer competitive pay and great bonuses. I mean, we see this all the time. You'll look at the Indeed ads or whatnot, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what so-and-so down the street is offering to get a good assistant in, right? Like anybody can offer competitive pay and great bonuses. But I promise you this, if the environment that goes along with that competitive pay and great bonuses is stressful, chaotic, unpredictable, people will leave. Eventually, those golden handcuffs and those great bonuses are not enough, and people will leave. And so what we need to be doing is we need to be thinking about culture in our practices, because that coupled with this career path is going to be what's going to help us keep team members. And I really believe that culture is not just something that you write on a wall or you hang up in the bathroom or whatnot. Culture is behavior. It's what happens when things go wrong in your practice and how your team chooses to deal with it. When a patient's upset, how does the team react to each other? How does the team react to that patient? When a schedule falls apart, how does the team react to each other? How does the team act to whoever may be part of what's making that schedule fall apart? When a team is stressed, how do they react? Are they reactive? Are they taking it in stride and saying, tomorrow will be a better day? Because when we can kind of have an understanding of this and understand that culture is behavior, when we can understand that behavior, that's really when the two come together and we really see that culture show up. I think it's really interesting when we think about that psychological safety in high-performing teams. What we know is that when a team feels safe, there's a huge factor or connector in team performance. And when employees feel safe to speak up, they're able to solve problems faster. When they feel afraid to speak up, a lot of time mistakes stay hidden. And that can really impact, and I'm sure many of you have seen this or experienced this in your practice, patient experience and team morale. And right now, what is it all about? What makes our practices different? It's the experience that patients have when they walk into our practice. We're all really good at the clinical component of it, I'm going to say. But what is that differentiator? It's that patient experience. How do they feel when they walk into your practice? How do they feel when they interact with your team? Do they walk in and are like, ooh, people are upset today? Or do they walk in and it just feels like they're at home and this is a place that they want to be able to send their friends and family into? So Google many years ago did a little project called Aristotle. And I'll talk a little bit more about this. But one of the things that in this project that they did, in this study that they did over a couple of years, is they found that the psychological safety was the number one predictor in team effectiveness. And when we are looking at our practices and we're thinking about how effective our teams are, depending upon where you're at in your growth cycle, is going to really make a big difference. So the main findings out of this study, and it was done between 2012 and 2014, and you can go look it up. They put it out, their findings officially in 2016, is they did this study over 180 teams internally within Google. And what they found is, after processing all of the data and over the study over all these years, is that teams performed better when their team members felt safe to speak openly, ask questions, admit mistakes, and challenge ideas. And I think when we think about that in our own offices and in our own practices, do our team members have that opportunity to speak openly, ask questions, admit mistakes, and challenge ideas? Because if they don't, if they are just told you show up, you do your job, you keep your mouth shut, you do what you need to do, again, are we going to keep and have effective team members, or are we going to have people that are moving on to the next place trying to find their tribe? And I think that's really what we continue to see.
And now, a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence.
So as we finish up, I want to just kind of do a little recap of what we can do to give you that last bit of how do we turn all of these ideas that I've been talking about over the last hour into action. So where do you start? Again, I want you to think about adjusting your pay informally over time. I want you to think about structured pay ladders, creating transparency and fairness. And I know the transparency word is really a scary thing to think about. And I've had to do this with a lot of offices when we're like, we're going to be candid about what somebody can make. And when it comes down to skill level, every other, you think about orthodontics as a whole is a trade. Nobody, except for the doctor, goes to school to become somebody who works in an orthodontic office. Now, yes, there are programs for orthodontic assistants in some states, but when you think about it, our orthodontic profession outside of our doctors and our practices is a trade. And so, like any trade, the more skills you have, they're transparent about the amount of money you can make. We, I believe, should be transparent and fair with team members and get away from how long you've worked here determines how much you make in an office. So if employees should be able to understand how growth connects to compensation, and that growth is not longevity of time, but growth in skill set, growth in their person, growth in their contributions to the practice. The next thing is simplify your bonus systems. Remember, if a team cannot explain how the bonus works, it's probably too complicated. Clarity creates motivation. And again, I'm just going to say this, always have a start and a stop time if and when you're going to do bonus systems. It's not forever, pick it and stick it. Step number 3, create those career pathways, career ladders, transform jobs into professions. We want to give our employees something to work towards. Again, going off of the assistant, and maybe it's assistant working to senior assistant, working to lead assistant, whatever it is. And it doesn't matter if you've got a small practice or a large practice, every core role in your practice can have a career path ladder. You just need to break it out, think about it, figure out where it goes. Step number 4, invest in development. I'm going to say this again. When you invest in your team's development, something really powerful, I promise you, is going to happen. Those team members are going to begin to see their role as a professional journey, not just employment. And that's what we're trying to switch, is we don't want team members that just see their role with you as an employment role. We want them to see it as a professional journey into a career in orthodontics. Have a career conversation. Again, this question alone can shift someone's mindset. It shows that you, as the doctor, see them as somebody with potential instead of just, how you doing? See you tomorrow. How you doing? See you tomorrow. How you doing? See you tomorrow. That very, very generic banter that goes on so much in our practices. And then the next one, the shift that I think practices must make is we need to get rid of that old mindset. And we really need to be thinking about this new mindset. Our orthodontic profession is an incredible profession. I was one of those team members that you may have on your team. I started as an orthodontic sterilization assistant, and I made this my profession and made my way into being able to have the opportunity to be a consultant that, is able to coach with hundreds of different practices across the United States. And I truly believe this. When we, as practice and practice owners, create environments where people want to grow, the results will be remarkable, and we will be able to change this tide where we have team members that are just constantly hopping from one job to another. But it takes us showing them that there is a career path in orthodontics. So I want to leave you with this one thought as we finish up. If you worked in your practice, would you see a future there? I think that this is really important and heavy, and we need to sit with that as leaders, because if this answer often reveals exactly where improvement is needed. So I hope that this gave you something to think about. If you want some help or direction on setting some of these career ladder paths, or just need to talk a little bit, you're always welcome to reach out to me and my team, and we're happy to help.